Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashoda Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashoda Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Okay, so we got 2 verses today. Apishvid Anye Cha Nijatma Daivam Apishvid Anye Cha Nijatma Daivam Apishvid Anye Cha Nijatma Daivam Ananya Vritya Samanuvrata Ye Ananya Vritya Samanuvrata Ye Ananya Vritya Samanuvrata Ye Apishvidyan Anye Chanijatma Devam Ananya Ritya Samanuvrataye Hridika Sadyatmaja Charudeshna Hridika Satyamaja Charudeshna Hridika Satyamaja Charudeshna Gadadaya Swasti charanti somya gadadaya swasti charanti somya gadadaya swasti charanti somya Hridika satyatmaja charudeshna gadadaya swasti charanti somya Abhishvidanye cha nijatma devam Ananya vritya samanu vrataye Hridika satyatmaja charudeshna Gadadaya swasti charanti somya Abhishvidanye cha nijatma devam Ananya vritya samanu vrataye Hridika satyatmaja charudeshna Gadadaya swasti charanti somya Api as also Svit weather Anye others Cha and Nija Atma of one's own self Devam Sri Krishna. So these two words taken together, this Nijatma Devam means they were just completely absorbed in following Krishna. Whatever Krishna said, they would just take as their life and soul basically, especially this Nija Atma. Atma meaning self. So Ananya, absolutely. Vritya, faith. Samanu Vrata, followers. Again, this word also has a lot of meaning. Also, they just completely follow Krishna without any deviation. This anu means like coming after. So sa or sama means completely. Yea, all those who. Hridika, Satya Atmaja, the son of Satyabhama. Charudeshna, Gada, Adaya, and others. Swasti, all well. Charanti, past time. Somya, O sober one. Translation. O sober one, others such as Hridika, Charudeshna, Gada, and the son of Satyabhama. Gada and the son of Satyabhama, who accepted Lord Sri Krishna as the soul of the self, and thus follow his path without deviation. Are they well? Responsively. O sober one. Others such as Hridika, Charudeshna, Gada, and the son of Satyabhama, who accept Lord Sri Krishna as the soul of the self, and thus follow his path without deviation. Are they well? Okay, so just there is no purport to this, so I'll read the next verse as well. But just to give you a little bit of background, so there's three personalities that are specifically mentioned here, because when it said the son of Satyabhama, I wasn't sure which one this referred to, because as I understand there are more than one. So Hridika is a fairly well-known person. So as I was mentioning yesterday, there's a whole pile of dynasties involved with they're referred to as the Yadavas, but there's all these sub-dynasties. There's the Bolgas, there's the Andakas, the Vrishnis, the Saras. I can't even remember them. There's so many different dynasties. I think I wrote them down here somewhere. Yeah, anyhow, I'll maybe mention that later. And so Hridika is the son of Bhoja. So there's a dynasty coming from the personality of Bhoja. And his son, he has a well-known son called Kritavarma. So Kritavarma, there's a bit of an intrigue there because we know at the Battle of Kurukshetra that Kritavarma, he wound up fighting on the side of the Kauravas. A bit of a palace intrigue was going on there. And then later on, when after the battle had finished, and there was still a number of you know, like all the Kauravas were basically destroyed, and there was 3 of them. There was Kritavarma, Kripa, and one other person, I can't remember who it was. They came to the camp of the Pandavas, and there were still quite a few Pandavas left. And I can't remember which one it was. Yeah, sorry, I just don't remember the detail of the story. I didn't have time to research this story fully. But anyhow, so what had happened was by Krishna's arrangement, there was this kind of big monstrous kind of person guarding the camp. It was a manifestation of Lord Shiva, and by Krishna's arrangement, he left at that point in time because the battle was over. And so these, I think Kritavarma and the other personality, which was Kripa, I think, they stayed guarding just to make sure no one came. And the other personality went in and killed everyone in the camp. He actually became empowered with an energy from Lord Shiva, a Shakti from Lord Shiva. And he went in and he killed everyone in the camp. Even the sleeping sons of the Pandavas, the 5 Pandava sons, who were actually quite young. And it's, I think it was Ashvatthama actually that got empowered. And so later on, when he came to see, because Duryodhana had hidden within a lake, he had a mystic power where he could exist underwater. And so he had hidden, actually a very, very powerful personality, Duryodhana. He'd hidden in the lake, and then he came, because his hips were broken by Bhima. And so he hid in the lake, he came out, he fought with Bhima, and then his hips were broken, he was lying there dying. And then these 3 personalities came to see Duryodhana at that point, and they and Ashvatthama had brought the heads of the 5 sons, and he had them in a bag. And then at that point, Duryodhana wanted to know if the Pandavas had been destroyed. Because that was his whole thing. He was just so consumed with envy. His whole life and breath was just to somehow or other cause disturbance, distress, whatever, to the Pandavas. And the many, many examples of this, we see that, you know, when they were growing up, he was always looking for ways of trying to, you know, dominate the Pandavas, to cause them misery. You know, one time they fed Bhima a poisonous cake, and they pushed him in a river hoping to drown him, because he sort of went unconscious, and they pushed him in the river and hoping to drown him. But we see always that the will of Krishna was there, or the will of providence sometimes is determined. That even when they pushed him in the river to drown, he went right down to the bottom, and somehow or other he went to some subterranean place. And in the subterranean heavenly planets, this is largely the place of the Nagas, the serpents. And so he's bitten by all these serpents, and that counteracted the poison. And while he was down there, he got some benedictions from the serpents and things like that. And then later on, we see when they were in exile, they'd been exiled for 13 years. And at one point, what had happened was the Pandavas were staying in a forest, and Duryodhana had heard about from his spies that he was staying there, that the Pandavas were staying there, so he decided to go there and humiliate them and make fun of them, you know, because they were dressed in simple clothes and things like that, and he wanted to make fun of them. But what happened was when Duryodhana and his friends, you know, Karna, etc., went there, they got captured by this Gandharva. And then Bhima was like, the Pandavas heard about him. Bhima was great, you know. They've been captured by the Gandharva. This is the end of the story. You know, he just wanted to leave them there. But Yudhisthira wouldn't do that. He said, no, this is our family. Our family's been dishonored here. We have to, you know, retaliate. And so what happened was Arjuna went there, and simply with a like a burning lamp, like the old lamps they used to have, not like we have nowadays, a torch or whatever, but just like a stick thing with a flame on top of it. He defeated this Gandharva and all his warriors, just completely decimated them. And so instead of the Pandavas being humiliated, Duryodhana and his friends were humiliated because they couldn't beat these Gandharvas, yet Arjuna, armed with just a torch, completely defeated the Gandharvas. And it's kind of interesting because we see later that Bhishma is reminding Duryodhana about all these things. He said, you're hoping to defeat Arjuna. Don't you remember the time he saved you in the forest, armed with just a torch? And even you, with all your weapons, couldn't defeat these Gandharvas. And he completely humiliated them. And Bhishma just reminds him of all these different times, And he said, and then he made the point that, and he has Vishnu, he has Krishna sitting on his chariot. How do you hope to defeat him? But somehow or other, Duryodhana is just this Maya Prahita Jnana. His knowledge was stolen by illusion. He wasn't able to see the inevitable reality that was in front of him. He wasn't able to see, that Yudhishthira was such a pious person, that Arjuna was, a great warrior, and that the Lord himself, Krishna, was sitting on his chariot, because he didn't accept that Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He thought that Krishna was just some kind of magician. Especially when Krishna came, just before the Balakurukshetra, and they were in the kingdom of Virat. Krishna offered to go as an emissary to try and negotiate peace. And when they heard that Krishna was coming, of course, personalities like Bhishma and Drona were quite happy because they accepted him as the Supreme Personality of God. I mean, Bhishma was actually a very, very advanced devotee. He was actually on the level of prema. And when they heard that, and Vidura also, when they heard that Krishna was coming, they were very happy. But Duryodhana and Shakuni and Karna and others, they were plotting how to capture Krishna, because they understood that Krishna, as the point that's being made here, is Nijatma Daivam. He's the life and soul of his devotees. And so they understood that if Krishna is captured, the Pandavas are defeated because they'll just lose all their enthusiasm. So they devised this plan to capture Krishna, and what it was is they had a big pit in the assembly place, where they would give audience to guests, and there was a trapdoor there, and the idea was Krishna would walk across the trapdoor would open, and he'd drop into it. But that's not how it worked out. He walked across, and the trapdoor opened. He just manifested his universal form, like a partial universal form, and Duryodhana's response, it's just some magic. He didn't accept that this was, whereas like Bhishma and the others, he's just like marveling, thinking, wow, this is fantastic, Krishna's so amazing. Whereas Duryodhana was just, it's just a magician. So, he's really an example of this, the demoniac and atheistic mentality, that even though it's like this pashanapi napashyati, it mentions in the Bhagavatam, even though something's right in front of their face, they don't see it. And this is exactly what was going on with Duryodhana. Even though the Supreme Personality of Godhead was right in front of him, he couldn't accept that this was God. Even though Arjuna so many times defeated them in different ways. Even in the last year of exile, when the Kauravas decided, because they heard from their spies that there were some extraordinary warriors staying in the kingdom of Virat, and Duryodhana had an inkling this might be the Pandavas, so he went there to try and flesh them out and see if they were actually the Pandavas. And then by discovering where they are, because see, they had 13 years in exile, but the last year they had to be incognito, so no one could know where they were. And they'd taken on some pretty amazing disguises. And even Arjuna had taken on the disguise of a eunuch. But actually he'd been cursed by one of the Heavenly Society girls that he was going to become a eunuch. And that it was arranged for a year that he would become this, and actually he became a eunuch. That even when because Virat had his courtesans examined Arjuna to make sure that he was actually a eunuch, because he was going to be teaching his daughter how to dance. So he didn't want, a virile young man teaching his daughter how to dance. And he was actually a eunuch. So really fantastic disguises. But what happened is when they attacked Virat, because they sent half the army to steal all the cows, and the other half of the army was fighting with the army of Virat. But then Brihadnala was Arjuna's disguise. He stayed back in the palace, obviously because he was a eunuch, and he had one of his Jaya. The son, who was a bit foppish, and he was he used to sort of brag about his prowess. Anyhow, so Arjuna, because he was bragging, his son was bragging to the ladies how, if I had a charioteer, I would go out there and I would defeat them, and did it like this. And then Arjuna, as Brihadnala, said, well, I used to actually, chariot, I was the charioteer for Arjuna sometimes, so I can ride your chariot. And so, they went, he was like, uh-oh, I've blown it now, because he was boasting that he was going to do all these things. And so anyhow, they went out, and then as soon as Virat's son saw the Kaurava army, he fainted. And then when he got off the chariot and started to run away. And like Arjuna's dressed up in all these, like as Brihadnala's dressed up in all this sort of colourful clothing. And like the Kauravas are seeing him chasing after this young prince and dragging him back on the chariot, and they think it's very funny. But Bhishma wasn't laughing. He had an inkling that this was Arjuna. And then so Brihadnala took this Bhuminjaya, I think his name was, I can't remember, to where they had put their weapons in a shali tree. Right up in a shali. Everyone thought it was just some dead body up there, but it's actually the weapons of the Pandavas. He got them to get them down, and he got his own weapons out, and they went to put his armor on and stuff like that, and then they went single-handedly, just him and this young prince, faced the army of the Kauravas, and then of course Duryodhana, Karna, they're all laughing, but then Bhishma and Drona, they saw him dressed like this, and they realized this was Arjuna. And then at that point, Duryodhana was making some comments, and Bhishma, he arranged for some of the soldiers to take Duryodhana away to protect him, and he said to the others, he said, prepare yourself for a fight. This is Dhananjay. And he knew it was going to be a serious fight. And on his own, first off, he shot 2 arrows, one at the feet of Bhishma and one at the feet of Drona, just to offer respect to his superiors. And then within a very short space of time, he completely routed the army. And still, even though Duryodhana, and actually later what happened is, as the fight went on, is Arjuna caught up with Duryodhana and stopped him from retreating, so he had to go back to the army. And he completely defeated him. And even though single-handedly, just him and this young prince who couldn't fight. And even though this happened so many times, still he had this idea he was going to defeat him. At the Battle of Kurukshetra, he had this idea he was going to, even though they had, basically twice the army they had, still he had this idea he was going to defeat someone like Arjuna. And then Charadeshna mentions here also. Charadeshna, he's one of the leading sons of Rukmini and Krishna. So he was quite one of the chief sons. He's present during the Swayamvara with Draupadi. He was a great warrior like his brothers and father. He fought with different personalities and killed them in the fight. His brothers are, or the sons of Rukmini, Prajumna, Charudeshna, Sudeshna, Charudeha, Sucharu. There's a few different personalities there. Now this also mentions Gada. I just want to give you a bit of background because otherwise they're just names. So Gada, also a very important personality. Gada is one of the sons of Rohini. So that makes him the brother of Lord Balaram. And he was a special personality, very dear to Lord Krishna. And we see it's described in particularly in the Mahabharata. But when they were at Prabhaschetra and the Yadavas were fighting amongst themselves, when they turned on Gada, because it seems Gada wasn't also involved in the fight. When the Yadus turned on Gada, Krishna became enraged, and that's the point when he picked up weapons and started to fight with the Yadavas. So it's quite and interesting. So Vasudeva, does anyone remember how many wives Vasudeva had?
12.
8. 8 wives, yeah? As far as I know, it's Devaki, Rohini, Bhadra, Malini, Madhira, Ila, Rochana, and Puravi. Some of them have different names, but generally there's 8 wives. And there's different lists. One list I came across that says Rohini had 6 sons, another list that says she had more sons than that, so it just depends where you read, I guess. Anyhow, so that's Gada. A prominent personality. Then, I guess I'll read the next verse.
Supposedly the son of Matsya is Uttara is supposedly the prince, and his sister Uttara.
So I think he's also called Bhuminjaya. I think. I could be wrong on that, but something like that. Yeah, Uttara. Yeah. So I just wanted to give a bit of an update on that. Okay, so the next verse, which has a purport. Apisvadorbhyam vijaya chutabhyam tamena dharma pratipatam setum duyodhano tapyata sat sabhayam samrajam lakshma vijayanu. Also let me inquire whether Maharaj Yudhisthira is now maintaining the kingdom according to religious principles and with his respect for the path of religion. Formerly Duryodhana was burning with envy because Yudhisthira was being protected by the arms of Krishna and Arjuna as if they were his own arms. And this is the point I was making before, is Duryodhana was just always filled with envy. He couldn't, practically couldn't sleep at night, just thinking that the Pandavas were prospering. As soon as the Pandavas were prospering, that would just drive him to have to do something to counteract that. Maharaj Yudhisthira was the emblem of religion. Whose son was he? Yeah, also known as Dharmaraj, yeah, because he's one of the Mahajans. When he was ruling his kingdom with the help of Lord Krishna and Arjuna, the opulence of his kingdom surpassed all imaginations of the opulence of the kingdom of heaven. And it's described that when they did the Rajasuya Yaga, so one of the things that would happen traditionally with the Rajasuya Yaga is the different kings would come and give gifts as an offering of submission, and there was so much wealth was brought to Yudhisthira Swayamvara, because usually they'd bring it into the court and they'd pile it up, they'd put it in the treasury. The treasury became completely full, so they actually were just piling it up outside the city. Just piles and piles of gold and jewels just sitting outside the city. No one stole anything. So that's how wealthy his kingdom was. Duryodhana, and when Duryodhana saw this, he was just seething with envy. He just couldn't deal with it, Just couldn't deal with it. Duryodhana, being envious of this opulence, planned so many schemes to put Yudhisthira into difficulty, and at last the battle of Kurukshetra was brought about. After the battle of Kurukshetra, Maharaj Yudhisthira was again able to rule his legitimate kingdom, and he reinstated the principles of honor and respect for religion. That is the beauty of a kingdom ruled by a pious king like Maharaj Yudhisthira. So again, Prabhupada making many, many important points here. As I was saying before, Duryodhana was always looking for ways to cause the Pandavas difficulty, and that's why when he found out that they were it was potentially them staying in Virat's kingdom, he thought, well, if we go there and we discover them, then they have to go in exile for another 13 years. And he was thinking this was his sort of solution, like, okay, discover them in the last year, another 13 years. When that goes by, discover them in the last year, another 13 years. Because he had his spies going everywhere. It was his constant obsession was to find where they are and to, before the exile expired, and then just send them back. And see, what had happened was he had his astrologers making the calculation that the time for exile hadn't expired yet, but at the battle when they went and when the Kauravas went to the kingdom of Virat to try to find them, and then Arjuna came out, then the time had actually expired. And Bhishma he calculated this is no, actually the time has expired. So the time for their exile has expired. And this, for Duryodhana, he was really upset about this. He was like seething with envy and anger, and So it's kind of interesting because Duryodhana is like the epitome of all bad. Even though he was materially expert, he was an expert ruler. He was a very, very competent ruler. He ruled the kingdom very well. But even though he was had so many material qualities, because he was ultimately envious of devotees and because he didn't accept Krishna as the Supreme Person of God, therefore it says, Harava Bhaktasha Kuto Mahadguna Manataranasi Davadobahi. It says that Harav Abhaktasha, if they're not a devotee of Krishna, they have no good qualities. And this is Prahlad Maharaj speaking. Even if they're adept at the practice of mystic yoga or the honest endeavor of maintaining their family and relatives, they must be driven by their own mental speculations and manaratenasa, hovering on the mental platform. So we see this with Duryodhana. He had many, many good qualities. And we say the same with Kamsa, many good qualities. Ravana, many good qualities. Ravana was a Vedic scholar. He was very, very expert in the Vedas, and he was very expert at ruling his kingdom. But he couldn't accept that Ram was the Supreme Person of Godhead. Kamsa couldn't accept that Krishna, a child, was the Supreme Person of Godhead. Therefore, they had ultimately no good qualities. And this is the actual calculation of someone who has good qualities. Are they a devotee of Krishna? Are they servants of God? This is the essence of all good qualities. If a person doesn't have that quality, then and this is the point that Krishna makes in the Bhagavad Gita. He talks about different qualities. He said, but actually the essence of it is, are they devotees of the Lord? And if they're not devotees of the Lord, then all their so-called material qualities add up to zero. And Srila Prabhupada would often use this as an example. He would talk about all these achievements in the material world. He'd talk about skyscraper buildings and the planes that fly in the sky and all these different things. He'd say they're all just big zeros. If you take all these zeros, you put them together, what do they add up to? If you have 1,000,000 zeros, you add them up, what do they come to? Zero. They're meaningless if it's devoid of devotion to Krishna. But and Prabhupada would say, he's saying, but if you take the one, Krishna, you put it in front of all these zeros, then you have something quite significant. And so this is the point. It's like this whole material creation. And we're seeing now, the way things are going, things are coming unstuck quite quickly. So it just shows you the fleeting nature of everything in this material world. We seek security in money, in a bank balance, in a house, in family. But Prahlad Maharaj refers to all these things as fallible soldiers. This Atma Sainyashu Asatsu Api, that all these things are fallible soldiers. What does he mean by fallible soldiers? It means that everything in this material world is destined to vanish. You can make the strongest building in the world, and at some point in time it's going to vanish. It's going to fall apart. You can have the biggest bank balance in the world, but when you die, what's the value of it? I think I've told this story before. I had this aunt, a great aunt when I was growing up. Her name was Aunt Agnes, and she was quite wealthy. And she always used to say to us when we were kids that if I can't take the money with me, I'm not going to go. But actually, Aunt Agnes did go, and she didn't take any money with her. Because it's all fleeting, it's all temporary. You can't hang on to it. You can't even hang on to your material body. It's so temporary. And you see, especially as we get older, we just I was just giving Pamalochambhu a bit of a neck rub before, and I was noticing how much heat was coming out of his body. He's just got one single sort of top on. I've got like 4 layers on. Right? And it's like, because as you get older, your body produces less and less heat. The fire in the body dwindles, and it gets to the point where eventually it goes out. That's just the nature of the body. And it's the nature of every single body. Like some living entities, like I saw an article the other day about these trees, these sequoia redwoods in America. And it was just talking about the oldest tree, thousands of years old. Thousands of years. They're being threatened. Well, they were. I don't know if it's still going on, but they were being threatened by bushfire or by fires. So even though they could be thousands of years old, just one fire comes and they're all gone, all dead. That's the nature of everything in this material world. And the only shelter we have, and this is why this verse 35 is really interesting for me, is it mentions there this Nijatma Daivam, is how they accepted Krishna as their life and soul. And this is, unless we can come to this point of accepting Krishna as our life and soul, then everything we have essentially is meaningless. Because it's temporary. It'll just come and it'll go. And as quickly as it comes, it'll go. And that's the nature of everything in this material world. And until we're convinced of that, we're going to have to, go through this cycle of repeated birth and death. And until we can, as Kunti, that really nice prayer of Kunti Devi, this Janmeshwara Shvatashi, Edamana Madampuna, Navahaiti Abidatumbai, Twamakinchana Gochara. This Twamakinchana Gochara, it means like the Krishna's the property of those who are materially bereft. Not meaning that they're poor, but that they have no interest in material facility. Then he's the property of those persons, not those persons who are trying to improve themselves in terms of birth, wealth, knowledge, understanding, knowledge, understanding, beauty. This is of no value. Yet we see in this material world, like, you go into the news agents, you see all the glossy mags, and they've got all these, like, so-called attractive women on them, and people are seeing this as like, this is what I want. I want a beautiful wife, or you get magazines with gold-coloured covers on them, and they've got expensive like private yachts or private planes and stuff like talking about all these types of things. This is what people aspire for. They aspire for having these things, but they don't see that it's so temporary. That even though they get these things, they won't be satisfied because they just want more and more and more. And as long as this is our aspiration in this material world, to have more and more and more and more, we'll never know true satisfaction, we'll never know true peace. But it's only, and Krishna makes this point really strongly at the end of the 5th chapter of the Gita, is Bhaktirang Yagatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suridam Sarvabhutanam Gyatmamam Shantim Rishati. That person who understands that I'm the controller and the enjoyer of all sacrifices, all austerities. I'm the proprietor, the Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, of all the planets. Sarvaloka means all the planets. Maheshwaram, Maha Ishwaram, that I'm the supreme proprietor. Not just the planets, but everything on the planets. And then he says, Suriram Sarvabhutanam, that I'm the supreme well-wishing friend of all living entities. He said, knowing me thus, Gyatva Mam, knowing me thus, Shantim Richati, this person attains peace. So this is the only way you can become satisfied in this material world, is to accept Krishna in this way. And Prabhupada actually, he identified this verse as being the peace formula. Everyone's looking for peace. And I think I was making this point recently. I'm not sure if it was here or somewhere else. But everyone's looking for peace in this material world. The United Nations was founded, back in, I think it was after the First World War. And they founded the United Nations. And the goal of the United Nations was to achieve peace. But just look at the history. The whole time the United Nations has existed, has there been any peace? Has there been a point where there's been no war? It's constant. It's either big war, small war, whatever. It's just going on constantly. So there's no peace in this material world. Why? It's because they're all trying to be little controllers. They're all trying to dominate. They're all trying to have their kingdom. And if someone else has got something they want, they try to take it off them. There'll never be peace as long as we're trying to enjoy this material world. As long as we're trying to be the controller and the enjoyer, there'll never be peace. But if we can accept Krishna as the supreme controller, the supreme enjoyer, and our only friend, our only real friend, then we can know peace. But not if we have these material pursuits, as Kunti points out. A very, very interesting discussion here, and just seeing the dynamic between Yudhisthira and Duryodhana. How Yudhisthira was completely peaceful. He didn't have any aspirations to even we see after Battle of Kurukshetra, he didn't want to rule the kingdom. He just wanted to go live in the forest. But then Krishna and ultimately Bhishma Dev convinced him, it's your duty, you have to do it. It's your religious duty to do this, and therefore he took it on. But actually, same with his father Pandu. Pandu he conquered the whole world. He said, but it had no taste for him, so he just went and lived the life of an ascetic in the forest. And he's peaceful. He's happy. He liked it. So we see with these Raja Rishis, they rule the kingdom, but it's really out of religious duty. It's not out of some desire to expand and to have more facility. Whereas we see, in modern persons, the materialistic persons, they want to rule, but they just like, we see, in Australia in the last election. I don't know if anyone here followed it, but there was a lot of things that the political parties were doing to stay in power. They wanted to make sure that they stayed in power. We see in the last American election, the guy who was in power was telling all sorts of lies to try and stay in power. They're so attached to the position. They're not doing it as a religious duty. And this is the point that Prabhupada makes here at the end of the purport. He says that, he's saying, Maharaj Yudhishthira was again able to rule his legitimate kingdom, and he reinstated the principles of honor and respect for religion. But we're seeing with the politicians, there's no respect for religion, and there's no honor. They will do anything they can to stay in power. They'll tell any lie, they'll cheat, they'll whatever, they'll manipulate the facts. Whatever they can do to stay in power, because that's what it's all about. I saw an interview on YouTube a little while ago. Someone it was one of those sort of independent news agencies, I guess you call them, was interviewing some politician in America. And the question he asked the politician was, what is the first business of a politician? And he said, to keep office. And then he said, but isn't actually the first business of a politician to serve the needs of the constituents? Oh yeah, that's right, yeah. And the second one's to keep in power. So he caught him out. But that's where they're all at. That's their whole position, is to maintain their material facility. Because why? They see it as their pathway to enjoyment. But ultimately it leads to frustration. We see that. They're always frustrated. But if we can understand Krishna's position, if we can take, as we see here, with Gada, Charadeshna, and Hridika, they saw Krishna as their life and soul. So they're peaceful in that knowledge. And that's how we can become peaceful, if we accept Krishna in this way. Any comments, questions?
Hare Krishna. So in accepting Krishna and accepting whatever facility that Krishna may offer you, sometimes we see as we get older, we only need a little bit of simple facility, but sometimes, I don't know, from my observation, the society doesn't always fulfill those needs as you get older.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could make some comment upon sort of how you surrender to Krishna, and at the same time, as you're getting older, you need to have a little something comfortable just to develop your relationship with Krishna still.
Yeah, it's not just as you get older. I also experienced is trying to serve as a brahmana. That when you do yagyas and things for devotees and stuff like that, I mean, essentially you just have to rely on what they give. But it's challenging because sometimes, I've had experiences where I've spent 3 or 4 hours setting up and doing a yagya, you get $10. It's kind of like, how do you live like that? Or like, going, because we're just trying to organise some trainings in the UK and Europe. I'll be heading over there in September, and like they'll give me some money towards my airfare, and that's about it. But I'm explaining to them, but like I gotta live. It's like I don't just live for the 24 hours I'm on the flight. I gotta live before and after that. But it's kind of challenging because at what point does it become a business deal? So unfortunately in ISKCON, there's not enough kind of awareness, I guess. I mean, I certainly don't want to be critical or point out that anyone's at fault or anything, but it just seems like there's not enough awareness of the importance of Brahminical culture and maintaining, but not just Brahminical culture, care for elders and things like that, You see in some communities it's quite central, that devotees are looked after, whereas in other communities it's not. And I'm not. It's not like a criticism or no endeavour to find fault, but I just think it's just a reality that's there. But then also there's the aspect from the individual is trying to put our faith in Krishna and to have that conviction that Krishna will look after us, and He does. We just need to see it. Like during the last major flood we had here, we lost our car. Right, it just was parked down on Tweed Valley Way, and the water went up over the dashboard, just completely destroyed. I wasn't so bothered by it, I knew another car would come along, and sure enough, we were, and it's like, I'm nothing, I'm just a very small devotee. If you're able to see how Krishna's looking after you, if you look for it, you'll see it, always, rather than thinking, because I'm so clever or whatever. So what happened was I was down in Melbourne at the time, and my wife was in Brisbane, and so when I got back, I started sort of doing the rounds trying to find a car. And then I went to our trusty local Subaru mechanic, Dave. I mean, I don't know if anyone's got a Subaru. He's like, he's a great guy to work with. He's a great guy. He's super honest. Anyhow, so what happened was there was a lady there. She had her Subaru. She'd blown up the motor in the car, and he put a new motor in. But in the meantime, while Dave was doing that, she got sick of waiting, so she went out and bought another car. And that car was up on the, when the flood came, Dave was getting all the cars out he could, but he couldn't get that one out, so he stuck it up on the hoist. So then we came, and Dave said, I've got a car, there's a car here for sale. She was asking a really high price. So he just went and saw the lady and said, look, this is the situation. We lost our car in the flood. How about it? Will you give us a good price on it? And she said, I don't know, I'll get back to you tomorrow. So she calls up tomorrow, look, you can have it for this price. I've got 2 cars. You lost your car in the flood. So she gave it to us really cheap. And that, to me, that is just 100% Krishna. Because I know like other people were looking for cars also, because a lot of cars, 20,000 cars or something in this area went under the floods. So it was hard to find a car at that point. But Krishna just made an arrangement. And if we can see that, it's as devotees, every minute of every day there's something happening in our lives, and if we can just see that this is Krishna, you just got to see Krishna present in your life, then you can become peaceful. Whether you got the facilities you need or not, well, maybe you don't need those facilities. Maybe that's just some material desire coming out.
Just on that point, like you said, to accept whatever Krishna gives you, but sometimes maybe you don't always accept that, you don't get what your basic needs are. So do you think then you have to look at yourself and your relationship with Krishna?
So my way of thinking, it's important to be constantly looking at our approach, the way we look at Krishna, the way we perceive our relationship with Krishna. But ultimately, we need to see that He's my master, I am His servant, and then as servants, generally speaking, the mood is whatever the master gives. Then I'm happy with that. But that's obviously an advanced consciousness, and I can say for certain I'm not that conscious. I have a lot of material desires, and I'd like to see those material desires fulfilled, because my thought is, if I fulfill my material desires, I become happy. But if we read what's being described in the scriptures, we can see that this is not the solution. This is not the path to happiness. The path to happiness is to surrender to Krishna fully.
Yeah, in relation to what she asked, I find your answer a little bit contradictory, because in one way you make an observation that in ISKCON they're not doing, maybe they could improve in the way that they take care of brahmanas, take care of older people, etc. But in another side, you're saying that we surrender to Krishna, and Krishna gives us whatever we need.
Yeah.
So from my understanding, it's like, that saying that said, God helps those who help themselves. It's
Yeah.
not like God comes like with the magic and sort out all situations. Like for example, if some people have the observation that something is not being done in a community, then maybe they can take an initiative and propose a plan or something, you know? But I think we take that too easy, like, oh, whatever Krishna wants, I do whatever Krishna wants. But I think we also need to take action.
Yeah. So I'm talking from two angles of vision there. One's a social commentary. Like in terms of the social system of ISKCON, or not ISKCON, but the Vedic social system, the care was there for elders, for women, children, etc. like that. That was part of the system. And you see, like if you read in the 11th canto, when the Yadavas went to Prabhas Kshetra to try to perform, Krishna said to do pious activities to overcome the curse of the Brahmas, he sent the women, the children, and the old people to another place for safety. He knew what was going to happen. It was his plan. So you can see always in the Vedic system there is this element of looking after the vulnerable. Always. It's always there. This is not so prevalent, not just within ISKCON, but it's not so prevalent within society these days, to some extent. But we're always hearing of heinous crimes where people have exploited children in so many horrible ways, or exploited elders or women or whatever. We're always hearing of these things. In Vedic culture, generally, this is very rare that this sort of stuff happens because of this overriding concept of protecting the vulnerable. And in terms of the other comment about accept whatever Krishna says, this is from the position of ideal spiritual consciousness. And we see, like you look at personalities, for instance, like Sudama Vipra or Kolabecha Sridhar, setting an ideal example of a transit, like a spiritualist kind of aspirations in terms of facilities. Is they just accept whatever comes by Krishna's arrangement. But as I'm saying, this is advanced. This is a very advanced consciousness. But in the meantime, while we're helping people advance in Krishna consciousness, ideally we take care of their needs. There's not a contradiction. It's just like different angles of the same situation.